Imagine this: a single company building an absolutely unprecedented football network across the entire globe. We're not just talking about one club here, not even two. We're talking about a highly synchronized, massive system of teams spread all the way across Europe, North and South America, and Asia. It's a system where young players are scouted, developed, and essentially moved up a ladder just to be sold for tens of millions of euros. And they're all sharing the exact same massive data pool, the very same playing philosophy, and, well, in a lot of cases, literally the exact same Red Bull right there on their badge. As a guy who absolutely loves digging into the nuts and bolts of sport, I gotta say, I find this setup completely fascinating. But while from the outside it looks like this brilliant top-tier corporate strategy, it has actually ignited a massive backlash from traditional fans. So, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the mechanics, the big money, and the absolute massive controversy behind Red Bull's global football empire.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this question right here, this is the core conflict of our entire Explainer today. On one hand, you've got this breathtakingly brilliant corporate system that just churns out elite, world-class talent. Guys like Erling Haaland, Sadio Mane, and Dominic Szoboszlai. But then on the flip side, you have traditional supporters who strongly argue that this exact same system is literally destroying the soul of the sport. To really understand how we got to this intensely divided point, we need to jump back to how this whole project kicked off and just take a look at the sheer scale of what they've actually built.
Section 1. The Global Football Network. To really wrap our heads around this empire, we have to understand its founder, Dietrich Mateschitz. You see, he didn't just want a corporate logo slapped next to a sport. Oh no. His ambition was to own the sport entirely.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer massive scale of their global footprint. You've got RB Leipzig anchoring the network in Germany. They're the European flagship. Then, over in the States, the New York Red Bulls are driving both sporting and heavy commercial goals. Down in Brazil, Red Bull Bragantino secures a really crucial spot right inside one of the absolute biggest talent markets in the world. And more recently, taking over Omiya Ardija in Japan gave them a major presence in Asian football. Plus, they've even started tweaking their formula a bit, grabbing strategic minority investments in clubs like Paris FC and Leeds United. It's a massive, highly coordinated web. But to truly understand the intense anger from fans, we've got to look at their very first big move.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Salzburg takeover. Back in April 2005, Red Bull officially entered the football space by buying SV Austria Salzburg. But they didn't just sponsor it, they completely erased the historic name, the traditional logo, and the colors, totally transforming it into FC Red Bull Salzburg.
Let's pause here for a second, because this is a fundamental disconnect. Football clubs, they really aren't normal businesses. For a traditional fan, a club is a generational identity. It represents their hometown, their family, decades of shared history. You can't just buy a football club and tell a community what their new identity is. But from Red Bull's perspective, the club was a corporate asset. It was meant to be a branded product designed to fit a scalable global model. And that specific conflict was so profound that traditional Salzburg supporters actually broke away to establish a totally new club from scratch just to preserve their history. Red Bull demanded absolute control. The fans? Well, they just wanted their continuity.
All right, Section 3. Designing the football blueprint. Salzburg was really just the testing ground. In 2009, they created RB Leipzig, all the way down in the German 5th tier, demanding a highly efficient, scientifically precise football blueprint to rocket them straight to the top.
Let's move to and see how this actually builds, because tracking this timeline reveals the sheer, staggering speed of the empire. From that initial 2005 Salzburg takeover, it took just 7 years after Leipzig's 2009 founding to climb the entire German football pyramid and reach the Bundesliga by 2016. That is fast. And now, looking ahead to 2025 and 2026, they are locking in absolute global heavyweights to run the overarching structure. But the true turning point on this whole timeline, it's sitting right there in the middle, in 2012. In 2012, Ralf Rangnick stepped in as the sporting director for both Leipzig and Salzburg. He was the architect. Rangnick fundamentally believed football could be organized exactly like a scientific process. He rolled out a unified, super aggressive tactical system across the entire network. We're talking high pressing, lightning-fast transitions, and crazy physical demands. But the absolute most crucial part of his blueprint was the recruitment strategy. See, Red Bull was never going to drop 80 million euros on an established superstar. No way. Instead, they engineered a system to buy the future rather than pay for the present. They essentially designed a machine to find the player who would become an 80 million euro player 5 years down the line.
Moving on to Section 4, the player transfer machine. To execute this specific vision consistently, they built a fully interconnected pyramid network that literally spans the globe.
At the very foundation of this pyramid, you've got scouts constantly evaluating youth in Africa, South America, Europe, and Asia. When a kid enters the system, a massive amount of data is collected on their physical development and tactical understanding. If they progress, they just keep moving upward through the Red Bull network. Now you might be wondering, why sell your best players? I mean, if you're building an empire, why let your biggest stars leave? Well, counterintuitively, selling players isn't actually a failure for Red Bull. It is literally the ultimate goal of the entire cycle. For a traditional club, losing a star player is absolutely devastating. But for Red Bull, it's just the successful completion of a business phase. They bring talent in cheaply, develop them in a unified system, increase their value dramatically, and then sell them off to a European superclub for an enormous fee. And that money is directly reinvested right back into the next generation. It is a perfectly sustainable, highly lucrative cycle.
Section 5. The corporate identity clash. It's exactly this ruthless corporate efficiency that brings us right back to the ideological battleground and that visceral resentment from traditional supporters.
So, the crucial point here is understanding exactly why fans protest so fiercely. Traditional supporters feel that Red Bull simply replaces 100 years of organic history with a shiny, branded marketing product. They take what should be a local community asset and morph it into just another node in a global corporate structure. And furthermore, when a corporate giant like Red Bull injects massive financial power into smaller markets, it completely shatters the traditional competitive landscape. Clubs that have operated organically for generations simply cannot compete with that kind of instant engineered wealth.
This clash is probably most obvious when we look at the famous 50+1 rule over in Germany. This principle was designed specifically to keep clubs under the majority control of their fan members. It acts as a strict safeguard against external corporate investors taking total ownership. Now, RB Leipzig technically operates within the rules, but critics strongly argue that Leipzig was deliberately structured to keep meaningful fan influence strictly limited, essentially finding a clever loophole to subvert the true spirit of the rule. And this is exactly why Leipzig has become the ultimate symbol of modern corporate football in Germany. The extreme hostility they face in stadiums across the country, it goes way beyond normal sporting rivalry. It's a fundamental protest against what Leipzig represents to the wider sport.
Section 6. Building a global ecosystem. Despite all the protests, the system is evolving rapidly. The end goal is no longer just winning trophies or selling energy drinks. It's about perfecting a permanent, self-sustaining global football ecosystem.
And honestly, nothing proves the permanence of this project more than the role of the global head of soccer. In January 2025, they appointed the legendary Jurgen Klopp to this position. I mean, they didn't just hire a manager. They literally secured one of the greatest football minds of a generation to oversee an entire shared ecosystem of knowledge across the worldwide network. And with former Salzburg coach Roger Schmidt already scheduled to succeed him in October 2026, it proves a vital point. This system is now way bigger than any one individual coach or club. It has become a permanent, overarching global philosophy.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the ultimate fear it creates for the wider football world. Look, you don't have to actually like the Red Bull project to recognize how terrifyingly clever it is. But the big question is, if Red Bull completely succeeds, what stops other massive companies from copying this exact franchised multi-club model? If more clubs become standardized brands operating within global networks, the line between a beloved community football club and a corporate subsidiary vanishes entirely.
Red Bull has undoubtedly built one of the absolute most efficient sporting systems in history. But, as we all know, football has never just been about efficiency. It's about history. It's about identity. It's about belonging. Red Bull is betting hundreds of millions of euros that the future of the sport relies on the system, not the sentiment. Leaving us with one final question to consider. Can you build a truly successful football club without owning the hearts of its supporters?